All right, so example 7.1.5, spending a little bit of time on the type 1 and type 2 errors, because that is one piece of information in this section that is actually new. The plant breeding department at a major university developed a new hybrid raspberry plant called Yum Yum Berry. Based on research data, the claim is made that from the time shoots are planted, 90 days on average are required to obtain the first berry, with a standard deviation of 9.2 days. So a corporation that is interested in marketing the product tests 60 of these shoots by planting them and recording the number of days before each plant produces its first berry. So right here is our sample size little m, and the variable piece of information that they're computing or recording for each of these. Again, they make this claim, this 90 days here. That is their claimed value of mu. And here is their claimed value of the standard deviation. So the sample mean is 92.3 days. So this is x bar. Okay, so this is why on the first two exams, knowing your symbols was so important. As we get these, kind of big paragraphs of information, we need to recognize the wording to pull out those particular values along with their correct symbols. So the corporation wants to know if the mean number of days is more than the 90 days claimed. So we're going to state the type 1 and type 2 errors in the context of this problem and the consequences of making such an error. All right, so in this case, again, we're looking at quantitative data, so we're going to be looking at means. So x bar is going to be the mean time to first berry for these 60 randomly selected plants that they ran the test on. And again, we're going to use that information to give us some idea about what the mean time to first berry is for all of these plants. All right, so as we set up the hypothesis, the company claims that that mean time is 90. Okay. We have some people that fear that it's actually longer than that. So our alternative here is that mu is greater than 90 days. So a type 1 error. So type 1 and type 2 errors, they are definitions that you just need to know. So they are on the flashcards. So a type 1 error is rejecting HO when HO is in fact true, which means in the end, if we reject HO, we're going to conclude HA is the true thing when it really isn't. Okay, so in this case, if the company commits a type 1 error, then they will say that the plants take longer to produce than 90 days, when in fact they don't. Okay, so type 1 error, we're going to reject the null hypothesis. We're going to conclude here that the mean time to berry is greater than 90 days, so they're going to say that they take longer to produce, when in fact they don't, because we've made this an error. Okay, so in this case, the company might choose not to market these plants. Because they were trying to come up with a plant that would take, 90 days or less, so that, you plant them and get berries right away. But so they may fear now if it actually takes longer than that, that they should pull them from the market. So the company might choose not to market these plants and would lose the money they spent developing them. Okay, the other type of error that might happen is a type 2 error, and this is where we fail to reject HO when HO is in fact false. So it's like we're believing a lie. Okay, which means you would not conclude HA when HA is really the true statement about the product or whatever it is that we happen to be looking at. So in this case, if the corporation or if the company commits a type 2 error, that means then they will not say that the plants take longer than 90 days to produce, when in fact they do take longer. So in this case, the company will probably go ahead and market the plants, but then consumers who buy them and plant them will soon see that they actually do take longer to produce berries than claimed. Okay, so, but then the plants will take longer to produce than what was stated. And so you might have a bunch of angry customers. So customers might get upset. So again, in this case, not only knowing the definition so we can clearly state what the error and context would be, but then thinking about that context and what the consequences of that error would be. Because the consequences are not going to be anywhere in the paragraph that you read. They are things that you just have to, that you will come up with on your own just from life experience. All right.